Up next on Way of the Renaissance Man, a conversation with the bard of fine cigars and Prohibition-era spirits.
Welcome to the Way of the Renaissance Man podcast. This is a show about ideas, personal empowerment, and celebrating the rational life. Our goal is to help each other discover the tools needed to better focus our minds, integrate our thoughts with actions, and live the lives we really want. I'm your host, Jim Woods.
There is perhaps no more iconic symbol of the ethos of celebration than a fine cigar. In this episode, Jim speaks with tobacconist, historian, and purveyor of the Way of the Renaissance Man brand cigars, David Haddad, creator of Fumar Cigars. David is a most interesting gentleman. He's a man that can regale you with true stories of his interactions with U.S. presidents, military leaders, world diplomats, and the key role he and the cigar have played in recent diplomatic history. Through developing a new business model with the luxury cigar experience at the epicenter, David has traveled the world bringing the celebration of the cigar to some of the most hostile, war-torn places on the planet. A former child actor, former golf pro, current entrepreneur, and philanthropist, this is one Renaissance man who has truly earned the moniker. And now, here's Jim's fascinating conversation with David Haddad.
So as you all know, I am fond of meeting and talking with and being around men of extraordinary artistry, craftsmanship, passion, focus, all of the things that go into becoming a Renaissance man. And today I have a real treat. It's a person who is the purveyor of the tobacco of the Way of the Renaissance Man brand. And he is quite the interesting fellow, as you will find out in a moment. David Haddad, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jim. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's my honor. Now, I wanted to start off today by reading a short sentence or two from your bio because I think it encapsulates why I like you so much. Okay, so indulge me for a moment.
Have at it.
With your own words. So
yeah, it was extremely well written by somebody I know fairly well. So.
There you go. Okay, it's described by many as a self-styled showman with a flair for Renaissance. David has been collecting rare cigars and one-of-a-kind spirits for nearly 3 decades. A bard in the world of cigars and prohibition spirits, David has brought some of the most famous of the world's decision makers, entertainers, and captains of industry to step back in time and experience the moment with his stories and collectibles. Introducing to the cigar industry an entirely new business model, providing luxury hospitality industry, world-class event production to nationally recognized gatherings such as the PGA, collector car auctions, Churchill Downs, and other major corporations, personal amenity programs on a national scale. And he's done that from his company called Fumar Cigars, which he founded in 1995, which has operations in 13 states and 33 markets, providing cigar services to over 350 resorts, coast to coast, and cigar retail stores and private clubs in 2006 in the Phoenix, Arizona area. So, David, the logical question here is, how does someone become a bard of cigars and fine spirits? That's my goal. I want to become that. So teach me, my man.
When I grow up, I want to be me. It all started as actually a way to pay for my golf habit. And that was back in the mid-'90s when the cigar industry was finding its legs, compliments of an assortment of different things that started happening in 91, 92, 93. kind of a confluence of events that included Gordon Mott and Marvin Shanken coming out with a little magazine called Cigar Aficionado, coupled with a movie that came out that was a James Bond movie where the lead female, it was a Pierce Brosnan one, so don't hold that against anybody, but where the lead female, Famke Jensen, actually smoked a cigar throughout the movie. And as a result, this boom of the cigar world, if you will, in luxury lifestyle and high profile combined and came together. And despite the fact that the industry had always considered itself part of the luxury industry, if you will, of the luxury lifestyle, it had lost its cachet in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Circled back to that in the 90s when things were starting to pop and happen. I found ground in the mid 90s after a couple of decades in the hospitality industry, developing concepts throughout the country, and got fortunate and saw an opportunity that did not exist in the environment that I was familiar with. To this day, I do not consider myself in the cigar industry. I am in the hospitality industry. I happen to sell cigars. But luxury hospitality is its own world, its own environment. It has its own needs. It also provides opportunities that traditional people in the cigar industry, tobacco industry, would never have thought of, nor would they see. Not because they're not good at what they do, but primarily because they didn't have the perspective that I had afforded myself for the prior 2 decades. And so when you are in the business of concept development in the industry that I consider myself in, part of your job is how to appeal to the highest and best wants, needs, and desires in luxury hospitality, which is a completely different arena than most people have ever been a part of. And the guests that can afford to put their head on a pillow for $600 a night, $2,000 for a round of golf for 4 people, a couple of $1,000 at dinners, and no problem. When I came into the industry, the opportunity to buy a $50 cigar didn't exist. The opportunity to buy a $2,000 cigar didn't exist. And yet the people that were already captured in these resort properties had already decided long before they got there that they were more than willing to do that. And as a result, playing into that, it wasn't just putting the product there and making it available to them. You had to inspire them through the senses. I come from F&B, food and beverage, and food and beverage is all about the senses. How do you get somebody to emotionally attach to an experience? Because frankly, if you can afford $600 to $1,000 a night to put your head on a pillow, you're used to all the biggest, prettiest buildings. You're used to all the best food. You're used to all the best wines, beverages, golf courses, you name it. That's what they pay for. They're used to that. The question is how do you get them to go that next step and dive into the deep end on something that they've never experienced, and then have them emotionally attach themselves to that? Because what we provided the property, the resort, was that experience the moment captured. And we use that very profoundly in all of our marketing, because if it was about the money, they'd be somewhere else. If it was about the moment, then you want them there.
Yeah, I think that's important to understand. I mean, for people, for younger listeners, sometimes they know that, let's say, that people are into cigars right now. But what they don't know is that cigars were not really anything that people embraced in like the late 80s, early 90s. It wasn't really anything that was popular then. And it kind of just took a life of its own up, like you said, through different kind of like the Cigar Aficionado magazine. And then it started to get a little bit more play in films. And then people started going to cigar bars. I remember there was a host of them that opened up, all over. And like where I was near, I lived in like West Los Angeles at the time, and we'd have Beverly Hills, like cigars places, West LA, Century City. There was every other week there was a new cigar place coming out, and every other week there was somebody new showing, hey, like, let's go have some, let's do this, let's do that. And it was awesome because I made a lot of contacts at those things. And I enjoyed myself there. It was mainly men, although there were some women there too. And the women that were there were like the coolest women because they were smoking a cigar along with the guys, So you wanted to know them. I mean, that was like girls that you wanted to meet, And so it was, like Famke Jensen. I mean, she, that's a quintessential example. I'm glad you brought that up because it's interesting, like the power of a film and what it can do, like for making something popular. And that's why all these companies are, scramble all the time to get their products in a movie because it's way better than just an advertisement for the product. If someone if Vin Diesel's driving the cool Dodge Challenger, then that's going to sell a lot of Dodge Challengers,
Cheap marketing date.
Exactly. So. And so, I mean, I think also too, like one of the things about cigars is that people, you mentioned this already. It's a sensual experience. It's a tactile experience. The experience of lighting the cigar, knowing how to do it right, taking your time with it, just being in the moment with that piece of workmanship and with the smells and the taste and the flavors. The whole thing just kind of you can lose yourself in there, and almost somewhat more than you can in when you're drinking spirits, because when you're drinking spirits after you have had 2 or 3 or maybe just 1 or 2, you kind of lose that sensory experience a little bit because that it tends to do that to you. It has that physical effect.
Whatever works, right? So actually, in taking what you're talking about to where I kind of originated when I was doing my writings and stuff back in the late 90s, I created a storyboard called Cigar Parables. And because there was so much poeticism and the different types of sensory inputs that you were just talking about actually got really, really core in their commentary. I would ask, because we do hundreds and hundreds, literally thousands of cigar events across the last 20 years, 7,000 of them. I would always ask people as we were sharing the cigars that were part of their program to tell me about their favorite cigar. Tell me about the greatest cigar they ever had. And after asking that question hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, I came to realize that every single person, without a fail, gave me the exact same answer. They told me where they were, what they were doing, who they were with, and why they were there. It really had nothing to do with the cigar. It had everything to do with capturing the moment. So the very first cigar parable is that the love of the cigar comes from the time you commit to it. How do you put that into a commentary? It's part of the storytelling, and that's what a bard is. And so I would share stories with them about places and times that I was experiencing, having been blessed to be all over the world, sharing with some of the greatest people of all time. Some I can talk about, some I can't. At the end of the day, I was given that same opportunity by asking each of these leaders of industry and captains of the world and politicians and musicians and famous people of all stripes and everyday Americans, everyday guests, and they all gave me that same answer. So by having that in my pocket, I really did understand that it was never about the cigar. It was always going to be about the moment, who they were with, why they were there, etc. And so having discovered that, it allowed me to step outside of the traditional framework of the tobacco industry and the cigar industry and get myself back where I belonged, which was in the hospitality industry, because capturing that moment and that essence, because that's what the guest will remember. they they'll remember your property, your hotel, your resort, your destination golf club, your event. They'll remember it by those characteristics, and then the fact that they had a great cigar along the way.
Right. Yeah, I think it's the thing about cigars for me is that sensual feeling of it and the actual process of smoking it. But whenever I do that, it's inevitably a time where I'm committed to relaxation and to reflection. It's not, I don't, light up a cigar while I'm doing something like some chores or anything like that.
Mowing the lawn.
Yeah, exactly. I don't ride my horse with a cigar, although I have done that before, but it has actually kind of got that Western kind of Clint Eastwood vibe to it. So I felt like I was, in a famous Western or something when I did it, but
give me a cheroot.
Yeah. Exactly. So, but I think, and this is interesting too. And this is something that a good fiction writer will bring out the moment that you do something and the associations with that moment are what really matter. And like you said, it's a Bard thing, because if you can tell a story by using the things around you, then those things around you are going to have more power.
Sure. They paint the picture.
Yeah. And you associate a cigar with all kinds of things. And what do we associate cigars with? We associate them with success, maybe an old boys club kind of thing at some point, but then also a kind of a new kind of.
It's a celebration of the moment.
Yeah, a celebration of the moment kind of thing.
That's right.
Or with a childbirth, or with a wedding or something like that, or with a promotion, or with some kind of success in a business venture. And I it's funny because there's other things that are associated with that too, like champagne or fine scotch or something like that. But there's something about that cigar that that kind of is the kind of quintessential element, and it's because of efforts of the things like that you do that that make that so. Because like you said, it used to just be in kind of an old an old kind of cigar den or like it didn't have a glamour element to it, at least for a while there. I don't know how long. It probably did back in the, earlier in the 60s or something like that. But for a while there, it kind of lost its appeal.
Well, one of the things there's a maturing process of generations as well. People in my age group and possibly your age group and others that we find ourselves around, more often than not, the smell of a cigar will actually be a very romantic thing to them because it takes them home. Oftentimes they had a grandfather or a great uncle or somebody in their life that meant a lot to them that they spent marginal amount of time with, but when they did, they had the good fortune of that essence, that smell would remind them and take them right back to Uncle Joe or to their grandfather that they miss dearly and that has passed some time ago. But the smell will take them back, and that romantic essence of smell being one of the great instigators of memories, it gives you that powerful feeling of very comfortable feeling. Now, to give you the polar opposite, Aunt Martha smoked cigarettes, and she wanted to grab you and give you a big kiss when she walked in the door. And the last thing you wanted as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old is to hug somebody that smelled like a cigarette. So, it is completely different and disparate smell, aroma, bouquet, the things that take you into that very warm place. People who don't smoke are less offended by a cigar than they'll ever be offended by a cigarette.
Right. Yeah. I never was tempted to try cigarettes, but I love cigars. So, and it's one of those things too. And yeah, it's definitely the famous work that literature work that outlines that is Marcel Proust's Remembrance of Things Past. And that was a catalog of kind of sense memories, as it were. And as you know, because I wanted to ask you about this, as a performer, as an actor, the sense memory is very important. And you have been classically trained as an actor. And so tell me about that. Tell me about your early days as performing.
Oh, Goodness gracious. So as a very young kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, I was, I guess I was wanted to be the center of attention. I think that's all it really boiled down to.
I can relate to that.
I'd like to color it up. I could color it up any way you'd like, but at the end of the day, I was as a young boy, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. I was always wanting to be the center of attention. So I was a goof, and my parents, I was a handful for my parents. But my mother indulged me, and my mother was a thespian from when she was in school. And we actually went to the same school, quite some time apart. But at the end of the day, the little town I grew up in Ohio, had a thriving arts community. And so I became very involved with music, theater, dance, etc., and did performances throughout that period. And then got into a drama program with a wonderful lady by the name of Sue Cowden. She's a whole other story. But Sue took me and trained me and taught me how to deliver impactful lines, how to have a stage presence, how to be able to deliver impact on stage through music, singing, dancing, performance. And it's the beginning of my Renaissance world. At the end of the day, I was a multifaceted individual at that young age, and until I was almost 18 years old, I was in performance of some kind all the time, and I thrived on it. Frankly, I was pretty good at it, but without the courage of your convictions, there was 2 things I was good at when I was a kid. I was really good in the theater and the music and the arts, and I was really good at playing golf. And neither of those 2 things had a high success rate.
Right.
And so I didn't want to grow up to be a waiter in New York, and I didn't want to grow up to be a club teaching pro at some podunk golf course in Kansas somewhere. And those were the 2 paths of least resistance when you are kind of crafting who you want to be and what you want to do when you grow up. Unfortunately, I didn't have the courage of either of those convictions at the time. So I decided that I would just put those in my pocket and use them in the future. And part of when I do speaking engagements with college students, I've been asked back to my own university on more than one occasion to speak to graduating seniors. I tell them that life is filled with the opportunities to accumulate skill sets. You never know what ones are preparing you for what you'll ultimately do in life. You have to assume that each and everything that you're doing is part of that book that ultimately will have a chapter in it at the end, somewhere, hopefully at the end, that says you win. And you can't do that if you don't accumulate an enormous range of skill sets. And especially if you're in the public environment where people like you and I thrive, we have to be able to speak on lots of subjects. We have to be able to converse. We find common ground with anybody. And you find that common ground because you've either been there or done that. And you have the skills to prove it. So,
yeah, I think, that's a fascinating point. It speaks to the essence of what it is kind of to be a Renaissance man. In order to have that experience and learn these things, you have to be curious and want to learn them, and you have to be in love with life. So, I could totally see you like performing on stage, and then also being an expert at golf. That's the kind of thing that requires like focus, intensity, requires commitment, it requires practice, and there's a lot of things in life that require all these different things that you can use in whenever you do, and you can transfer those skills.
One of the things that my father was a very, very successful doctor, developer, and did lots of things. And one of the things that he was very much adamant about was being self-reliant and being able to control your surroundings and not be controlled by your surroundings, to never be at the mercy of others. Golf is one of the most amazing personality traits, because golf is the only sport anywhere that requires you to call penalties on yourself. It's the only sport where it is you against the golf course. You're necessarily not playing the other individuals on the course, and you don't have a team. It's you. It's all about being self-reliant. Either you have those skills or you don't. Either you've worked and earned that right to be on that golf course at that time, or you haven't. It's as simple as that. And it's also very, very clear on success. Win, lose, good shot, bad shot. Either you strike it right or you don't strike it right. And these are metaphors for life, and they're really important to, especially in a time like we're living in now, where there's a lot of folks out there that are less, are feeling more like they're entitled to something versus have earned it. And earning things and being self-reliant is critical to your happiness.
So. Right. Yeah. I think that I was just about to say that I've never played golf. Full disclosure. Okay. But the thing is, and I know, but almost everyone I know does, and they all tell me the same thing about the kind of, it reveals who you are, so to speak, as a character, because you need to be. I mean, there's no, like you said, either you hit the right shot and it goes in, or it gets close to the hole, or you hit a poor shot, and it's on you to either go find that thing and figure out how to correct your stroke, your swing, and you can either do that, you take that responsibility on in life, and you can say, okay, I'm good. I know that I'm showing it to the right. I know that I'm not hitting it as far as I could. What do I got to do to correct that problem? And that is true for anything in life. You have to look at it and say, okay, if I want to have this outcome, what do I need to do to get that outcome? Now, the one thing you don't need to do is to look around for people to blame for the reason why you haven't done that. And that is the problem right now. I think unfortunately, a lot of people suffer from, and what is nourished too by a lot of societal kind of attitudes. Oh, well, it's not your fault. You had a horrible upbringing, or you live in a underprivileged community and stuff. I'm not trying to discount anything like that in a way of I mean, obviously not everybody has the same opportunities in life in terms of where they started and where they're going to finish and things like that. No doubt about that. However,
excuse me, but I would beg to differ. Here in this great country, we have all the same opportunities. It's the determination and the effort and the energy and the focus that you bring to the dance. Let me give you a reason why I say that. I've been in business some 25 years, and just in this company, but I've been working in the business force for 42 years. And during the last 20 years, our generation, us, we have tolerated and lived through more economic disaster than just about any generation in history. If you think about it, from 9/11 to the crash of 2008, 9, and 10, to what's just happened in the last 6 months with COVID and everything else, I would beg to differ. I would tell you that the people that still have their head above water and the people that are still paddling like mad, they look like that duck on the water, the feet are going like mad, but the body is swimming along nice and smoothly or whatever. We're the ones that decided that I've got no plan B. I got plan A, and I'm going to make plan A great. And I don't care what obstacles, what obfuscations, what ridiculous hoops I have to jump through. Because success to me is much more important. It's self-defining. It allows me to be who I am. It allows me to support those that work for me. It allows me to take and send my daughter to a great university, my sons to become successful. The things that I want in my life are determined by me. And I don't care what, I'm in an industry that's the most regulated, taxated, obfuscated industry in the history of man. trust me, every local, city, state, federal busybody.
Agency that writes part of it.
I'm telling you what, there are more people with a bullseye on my forehead than just about any industry that you can name. Okay? In fact, I will tell you this. My industry is a leading edge indicator. And the reason I say that, if you look at every tax in the world, every regulation in the world, they test drive right, left, center, city, state, federal, doesn't matter. They all test drive their creative destruction on the tobacco industry because there's no downside. They can they can beat us over the head with some idiotic regulation and some obfuscation that nobody could be successul in. And we, as small business owners, because the industry that I'm in is surrounded and fulfilled by the small business world, we have learned how to navigate those waters. We see that there's going to be choppy waters every day. And so you can
you guys are accustomed to adjusting. I know because I know that the easiest and most passable kind of ballot initiative is some kind of tax on the tobacco industry.
That's a no-brainer. Everybody will vote for it.
Everybody wants to demonize tobacco, and of course it hurts the small, the poorest in society are the ones that are hurt most by it. Of course,
right. But I guess the end of that bookend of that story is this, though. Here is, if they like, they being those that are the regulators and taxators and the people that put obstacles in your path to success, it doesn't matter. It just happens to be that I'm in the cigar industry, but everybody's got to navigate the waters, man. These are the waters that are there, right? Can't pick a calm lake every day. And at the end of the day, if they like, people always say, oh, it's just the cigars, it's just tobacco, it's just cigarettes. I go, you know what? That's fine and dandy. But sooner or later, they're going to find something you like. Okay? And if you don't believe me, ask Mayor Bloomberg. Because he took that little road show on tour. And that's how sodas got into the game in New York City. And, if you don't pay attention, watch out. Anything that you do in the American environment, I'm going to stick to the American environment because I don't want to pretend that I know what happens in every other culture. But in the American culture, anything that you do on a repetitive, consistent, daily basis, a high-use item. Let's go with something like coffee. Okay? Coffee sounds innocuous, right? But they'll go through the same routine. First, they'll demonize it. They'll invent some kind of ridiculous study that says this is bad for you or that's bad for you. And then they're going to take it on tour and say, hey, we probably ought to regulate how that's done, or at least tax it so that all those poor stupid people, they don't have to, drink it every day. So at the end of the day, we're the proving grounds, if you will, for all of that. So when I'm doing speaking engagements, oftentimes I don't care what industry it is, because frankly, it's a universal concept, and that is how the obstacles get in your way and confront you. And then what are you willing to do? Are you willing to fight back? Or are you going to cave? Or are you just going to navigate the waters? I've chosen to navigate the waters.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. And that's a winner's attitude for it. Just to go back, what I was saying before is we don't all start from the same spot. However, we all have the same ability within us to do something about the spot we're in. And we need to be able to understand that, because right now the kind of default attitude among a lot of people is, well, he can't achieve, and here's why he can't achieve. And so we have to be sympathetic to that. The victimhood actually makes a victim out of that person's ability to do something good with their lives.
It's demeaning and demoralizing.
It's insulting. Yeah,
it's insulting.
Exactly. I agree with that 100%. And because it's that whole thing of a bigotry of low expectations. Amen. Oh well, you're this, so you can't do that, or you're this, or you can't do that. I mean, that is just ridiculous. It's like, don't you want somebody to be able to live up to their potential? Don't you want someone to be able to, to rise above where they may have started, or even it doesn't matter where you start. I mean, if you start out with all the advantages in life, and you don't do anything with it, that's even sadder than if you started with no advantage. I mean, and we all have something we can do to but trust our lives. And that's the whole point of this podcast, actually, is because I want people to understand that their result is a direct kind of consequence of their focus, of how they integrate information, and how they choose to celebrate that in their lives. And one of the
how bad do you want it?
Yeah, how bad do you want it? And that it's only then when you can sell. Like if something comes easy to you, then I mean, there's nothing to celebrate.
Yeah, there's only a handful of people in the world that kind of hit the home run out of the gate, and you can name them: Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg. And most of those folks, they're 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, and boom, light comes on. They fix an enormous issue in world life challenges, whatever the case may be, and everybody knows their name. For the rest of us, there's 20 or 30. I always tell people, you're paying me to do in 30 minutes what took me 30 years to learn. Okay? And so you're paying for the other 29 years, 355 days, 23 and a half hours. So please don't complain about what I charge. It's not something I learned overnight, okay? And whether it be crafting a hand-rolled cigar, or whether it be teaching somebody about the history of Prohibition, or taking somebody on this long-winded journey through the story of Americana through the lens of the tobacco leaf, from the 1492 landings in November by Christopher Columbus to tomorrow. I can do all of those things, but none of that happened overnight. It all happened through an accumulation of skills and an accumulation of interests and, frankly, a practical recognition that said that if I'm going to be in a business environment where I'm surrounded by these leaders of the free world, if you will, then I better be able to converse on many subjects. So I have to read the sports page every day. I watch the business news virtually all day so that I'm on top of each and every one of the different companies that are coming and going, who's winning and who's losing, and what's around the corner, so that I can get into this conversation with these people and not sound like an idiot. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same direct thing from in my industry. I mean, people pay thousands of dollars to find out what I want, what I'm looking at, what I'm thinking about the markets and things like that. And in my industry, people know that it takes a while to gain that expertise, and it takes like years of practice and years of like kind of doing the walking the walk, as it were, and you can measure your success rate, things like that. And so, if you're able to like demonstrate to people that you have value for that, then they're willing to pay a sizable sum of money for me to help them. And it always makes me laugh that like some of my friends ask me, oh, what should I do like here? What should I do there? I'm I said, well, there's people out there that pay thousands of dollars every month to find this out,
Oh, yeah.
Would you like me to just respect their wishes and just tell you right now?
Well, my dad had a philosophy. My dad's philosophy was simple. He said, don't be in business to give away what you sell.
Right. There you go. I will, however, help my close friends if they ask me directly. So anybody that's my close friend out there that wants direct advice, I'll be happy to give you advice. But you cannot hold me accountable for either a positive outcome or a negative outcome. It's just the way it works. So
that's why you pay a CPA.
Exactly. All right. So there's a couple of things I wanted to make sure we get in, because I know that the two of us could go on for a long time with a lot of stuff, which is part of the reason why I enjoy you. But I want to know a little bit more about your work with the USO and with veteran groups, because I find that extremely noble, and it's something close to my heart. As you know, I was in the military, and I know a lot of ex-military, and I know you work with like people like Gary Sinise, the actor, on his foundation. So tell me about that. Tell me how you got involved, and tell me what you're doing with this project, and tell me how other people can get involved.
I appreciate your request. So it kind of started as a failed business chance, as most things are. One of the things about being of service and being in a position where whatever skills you might have or whatever opportunities you can provide benefit others, that's what feeds your soul. More often than not, the folks that I have been blessed to be around, didn't aim at that. It's kind of where God or life let them go. And it depends on whether you're willing, able, capable, emotionally prepared to see the opportunities that go along with that and capture them. So that's kind of the preface to this. So back in the probably I think it was 97 or 98, on a absolute lark, I bought something that I didn't know was for sale, and that was the logo rights to each of the branches of the military. I could buy them outright, the licensed rights, to put a cigar band on a cigar with the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. A cigar band with their artwork. Back in the day, the military didn't really understand the value of licensing, and they didn't understand the value of the power of the emblems when it came to a marketing opportunity. So they literally sold them outright, and what I paid was like nothing. And no commissions, no rates, no any of that stuff. And it was a business opportunity for me as I was learning my own industry. I was looking for ways to sell cigars, of course. So I said, well, the military guys, they're all pretty loyal buyers. They're loyal people. They love their units.
Yeah, we love our brands. We love our units and stuff.
Yeah, you love your branch. And so I figured an Army guy, he's going to buy an Army cigar. Watch him, Well, proof purchase that you really are as dumb as you are. We went through the process with APHIS of getting licensed to be able to sell on the bases as well. Okay, at the
that's the PX.
At the PXs, the BXs, and all of the different venues that could possibly be valuable to us, right? So we partnered with a company called Oliva Cigars because at the time we didn't have a manufacturing facility and we didn't have the capacity to create the product. So we partnered with Oliva Cigars, and they actually crafted us a great product, nice, price effective. Retail price was about $5 for the cigar with the different branch logos on it. We crafted all sorts of fun stuff that went along with that. And off we went to a half a dozen bases in Southern California, and here is Arizona. And proudly we're in there, and we put those Army cigars on the Army bases and the Air Force cigars at the Air Force bases, and at the Squid base we took care of them, and over there at Pendleton we took care of them, and et cetera, and waited back and waited and waited and waited and sold virtually nothing. Here's what we didn't know. The people on the bases that were using the BXs and the PXs, et cetera, were generally E1s, E2s, E3s. And they had families. And they made about $16,000 to $17,000, maybe $18,000 a year. They wanted 5 cigars for $1. They didn't want a $5 cigar because they couldn't afford it. And the people that could afford it, officers, NCOs, etc., they didn't live on base. They lived in an apartment or a condo or a house somewhere off base. And more often than not, it wasn't in this wasn't in their queue. And they went to a cigar store when they wanted to buy cigars because they had the money to do so. So I totally missed the mark. It was a failed, beyond failure moment, right? Then this little thing called 9/11 happened. And we all know where we were. We all know what was happening in your own life when 9/11 hit us. And shortly thereafter, several months later, I started getting phone calls, emails that were new at that time, frankly, and I would get requests from friends, family, and other people that I'd bumped into and run with and worked with over time, saying, "Hey, my son is deploying, and my daughter is in a unit, and they're getting ready to head down range. Do you suppose you could? Do you still have those Air Force cigars? Do you still have those Army cigars? Do you still have those Marine Corps cigars?" And we said yes. And my wife, may she rest in peace, and I made a business decision right after 9/11 that we would never sell one again, and that we would always give them to those that serve. And 1.2 million cigars later, I sit here in front of you, having been to as many far-flung third world hellholes as anybody could ever imagine. And it was a vehicle that I didn't realize I was driving. Everybody wanted them. We actually became the progenitor and the creator of cigar clubs for the military through CENTCOM. It's kind of a strange occurrence, frankly, mainly because we were in a part of the world where they don't, at least not in public, drink alcohol. And the Muslim culture and the Islamic culture is that alcohol is a forbidden. And so as a way of being respectful to them, Tommy Franks and the boys at the top of the food chain, back when we first started going into the Middle East, made a decision that the bases would be dry. And believe it or not, it's the first time in history any military, anywhere, anytime, went to war without alcohol.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that was a big complaint amongst the rank and file.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So what ended? But here's the challenge with that: the alcohol, officers' clubs, enlisted clubs, etc., throughout time provided that retreat and provided that space where you could decompress, you could gather with your comrades, talk about the day, and fulfill the very much needed camaraderie portion of being brothers in arms. And the brothers in arms mindset is one of life and death. It is there's only two people in the world that are important to you: the guy to your right and the guy to your left. Okay? And everybody else is inconsequential. It's just those two guys. And you hope that the guy next to you has the same philosophy. And so when you can sit back and have a beverage with them, that was throughout time the historical practice. Well, we filled in the hole because one of the things that was never commented on in either the Torah, the Bible, or Islamic Quran is smoking, because it didn't take place until 1,500 years after the last manuscript was written. So it's not considered a vice, believe it or not in their cultural ways. So they all smoked. So it was good to go. And we filled that gap by creating cigar clubs. Didn't know I was doing it, mind you. And it was certainly a grassroots thing that kind of started sprouting up. We would start getting emails, comments, letters, hard letters, you name it, just begging, pleading, if you have any cigars, can you please send them to us. And I don't want to take all the credit. I don't know of a single manufacturer. I don't know a single cigar company. I don't know a single cigar store. I don't even know a single cigar smoker that didn't send cigars to some soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine. Everybody in my industry had the same philosophy. I took it to a kind of a crazy man's level, but I told you, I like to be in the middle of the stage. It's my own fault. But, the answer is yes. Just tell me what the question is. We got embedded in this to such a point that by 2006, John Abizade, who was the four-star in charge of the CENTCOM, and I got together. We were camping in a redwood forest, and he told me the story about what he called the pleasure police, and it was back in 2004 or three. It might have been 3 or 4. And he said, "Yeah, I remember. I was in my office in Tampa, and in walks the two civilians that are kind of the busybodies that are always looking for cultural misappropriations and political correctness and all the things that frankly a four-star something as a four-star general just doesn't give a rat's about." And so anyway, John told me, he said, "Yeah, we were having breakfast underneath the redwoods, and he looked at me and said, 'Yeah, I remember exactly when you started doing this.'" And I said, "What?" "I don't believe you." "What?" He said, "Oh, no. He said, "I was sitting in my office and minding my own business when in through the door comes these two clowns, male and female, one of each. And they said, it's come to our attention that some of our citizens are sending tobacco products and cigars and stuff over to our boys in in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we certainly don't think that's appropriate. I mean, they're deadly, they're dangerous. And John said, he looked at me, he says, I didn't even put my pencil down. He said, I kind of looked up at him and I said, you know what? There's a lot of things that are going to get our men and women killed over there. Pretty sure a cigar isn't one of them.
Exactly. That was pretty low on the totem pole of risk right there.
Go away.
When I was at the White House in 2004, the president and I had spent a lot of time together. His father, 41 and 43, were both very dear, and did a lot of work for both. And we presented him the very first dress boxes of the 4 branches of the military that we had. We didn't have the Coast Guard one at the time. Sorry, Coasties. But anyway, and he was so enamored by them that he literally he busted out the Marine Corps ones and was handing them out to his detail that was all over the White House, of course. And just, here you go, sir. Here you go. You got to have one of these. You got to have one of these. And it was a start of a very, very close and dear friendship that has lasted. And so I got to be honest, when I was asked by David Petraeus in 2007 to help him, he actually called me from Baghdad, which, I don't know if you've ever been sitting at home at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night and your phone rings, but in my world, if my phone rings at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night, it's generally bad news. You screwed something up, you forgot something, you're an idiot, whatever. And
it's not usually the commander of U.S. forces.
No, it's really not the commander of all the troops in Iraq at the time.
Anyway, and General Petraeus said, David, and I'd never met the man. Okay, we had mutual connections through several different arena, if you will. And I don't know that he'd heard of me, but I'd certainly heard of him. And he said, this is Dave Petraeus over here in Baghdad. And when you're about to say something really stupid, but you can't stop yourself, you get to that moment where...
Yes, I know that well.
Okay. There's a couple of these in this comments, okay? So he said, David, I need you to come over here to Baghdad. And, of course, one of those moments came right out of my mouth. I went, Iraq?
That's generally where Baghdad is. That sounds like something I would say as well. Like, what? Iraq?
He said, what I need for you to do is to help me create, and he told me this backstory. His lieutenant, if you will, his right hand was a guy by the name of Ray Odierno. And he was a 4-star as well. And Ray is 6'5", 6'6". He's bald as a cue ball. Kind of like a really large Great Dane. Nice as can be. But at the end of the day, he's a 4-star general in the U.S. Army. And he was in charge of trying to help form the government for the Iraqi people, from the Americans' perspective. And he would walk into these meetings with all of the leaders that you heard of on TV, Al-Nouri, and all of the cast of characters that you heard when they were trying to deal with this. And he said it was absolutely a S show. His words, not mine. He'd walk in, and the very first thing that would happen is everybody would just start bellowing. And the adversarial relationship that was founded in that room was staggering. It was palpable. And they never could get past square one. They literally just spent their time arguing. And so Ray had this moment where he said, you know what? They're not drinking. We'd probably walk in there with a bottle of bourbon and start pouring until everybody's right until
or something. We just break
out the vodka and pour until somebody folded, and or you were hugging because you were drunk, it was just one of those things. Well, that opportunity could not arise in this circumstance. But he said, you know what? They smoke a lot of cigars, and I see them smoking a lot of cigars. So is there some way that you can create something that we can use as an icebreaker? Well, as a historian, as truly my nature is as a historian, I know this history of my industry and how impactful cigars and tobacco through time since we first got here in 1492. through the current had an impact on a lot of different parts of, and that's a whole nother show. We'll do that another day. But at this moment, at this time, they needed something that would be an icebreaker. So I partnered with Zycar, and we created a carbon fiber 3-finger cigar case with the emblem of the Multinational Forces logo engraved on it, and a titanium dual blade cutter with the identical, and they were numbered editions. And someday, if you can bother to find your way down here to Arizona, I will gladly share with you and show you what I'm talking about. But these were amazingly beautiful American blue pieces that had 3 custom-made cigars that we made with that logo embossed on them as well. And when we got those sets, 100 sets they got, when they got those sets, Ray took them into the first meeting, and exactly what happened as what we talked about in the first part of our conversation. They stopped, they cut, they lit, and all of a sudden, the 40 or so people in the room were talking about family. They were talking about wishes, hopes, and dreams. They were talking about the days when they used to grow up and go fishing. And they would go to the mountains for hikes, and they would spend time with their families. An hour later, the conversation started about, what are we going to do to make this place go back there? And within 30 days, the government was formed and the purple fingers were shown. To this day, General Odierno and General Petraeus refer to it as their moment of cigar diplomacy. It was groundbreaking. I happened to be a lucky guy in the back that nobody knew about that created this. It was their idea, and I was fortunate enough to fulfill it. Shortly thereafter, they said, we need you to come to Baghdad. And, of course, I said, what, Iraq? And I was put on the board of directors for the USO and worked with Armed Forces Entertainment and this amazing group called the American Airlines Veterans Initiatives. And you know, a company that is in hard times right now, American Airlines. Let me tell you, Bruce Crandall, who was their CEO at the time, Medal of Honor recipient, amazing American, believed in us and believed in what our mission was, which was going to put smiles on kids' faces when they least had expected it. And Gary Sinise and myself and Tony Orlando and lots of Miss Americas, endless parade of Miss Americas, and many of the famous people that you would recognize from TV, John Ratzenberger and George Wendt. George Wendt's kind of a tool, but John Ratzenberger, these are cheers, Chuck and Norm and Cliff, if you will. Great Americans. George, Cliff, good guy. John Ratzenberger is just a great guy. Anyway, having said that, we all partnered up and we started creating these entertainment packages that we could deliver using American Airlines as our parent and USO as our foundation, and Gary Sinise and the band called the Lieutenant Dan Band. If you're not familiar, please look them up. They are amazing, and Gary is exactly what you think he is. He is one of the greatest Americans, the Bob Hope of our day, entertainer, not just an amazing actor, but a great human being. We have shared a lot of time together. We made a movie back in 2008 called
tell me about that movie.
It was called For the Common Good. So we're out doing our little dog and pony acts throughout Iraq and Afghanistan in 2008, and we had a film crew of 2, director and producer Jonathan and Deb Flora. They were Disney execs and Disney people from Walt Disney, and the band and us, and about 10,000 pounds of school supplies. Mary Jean Eisenhower, President Eisenhower's granddaughter, and her group, People to People International. And Gary had another little subgroup called Operation International Children, Operation Iraqi Children at the time. We had put together literally 10,000 pounds worth of school supplies in little 1 pound bags. And we would go throughout what you would recognize as fob hopping. And that's going from forward operating base to forward operating base via Blackhawk. And we would find the school kids in the region and in the area, and we would be handing out the school supplies that they so desperately needed. Because one of the universal truths of life that you learn when you are in third world hellholes, and I've been doing that since the early 80s, going to places nobody wants to go, is that one of the universal truths of life is there isn't a 7-year-old on the planet that doesn't know the good guys from the bad guys. They all do. And by taking those little kids and giving them the school supplies, we were showing them that these guys that were dressed in these goofy, strange outfits, and rattle caps and stuff like that, we were the good guys. And we wanted to make sure that they understood that we meant them no harm and we wanted the best for them. And that translated to safety and security to our troops, because these kids would be the ones that would kind of give you the look and let you know when the bad guy was over there and who was a bad guy and who wasn't a bad guy. And it paid dividends for eons. So the name of the movie was called For the Common Good, because it was for all the common good. And we filmed from Kuwait to you name it. We were all over the place. And my job primarily throughout this thing, other than performances that I had to do and cigar programs and stuff. And by the way, I took about 20,000 cigars with me on each trip. So here I was. 50 duffel bags stuffed with cigars, right? And I ended up carrying the cucumber. And all you people in this production world and yourself know what the cucumber is. That's a boom mic, right? And the boom mic's about this big, covered in fur, and it's kind of a heavy and obstacle thing. So I would be the boom mic guy for most of the programming, and then several places where Gary and I were doing things together, or because it was obviously Gary Sinise was going to be the focus of the movie, and his band, which is amazing, and what their journeys found out and saw and did. And so if you get the movie, or if you watch the movie on Netflix or wherever it is out there, it's on TV quite often, pay very close attention, because while we were showcasing the movie, the first time I actually got to see it after the directors were done and the editors were done was at the GI Film Festival in 2009 in Washington, D.C. Now, I remember sitting in the front row with all the luminaries and everything else, and movie comes up and we're watching it and we're watching it and we're watching it and we're watching it, and 1.1 second I was on screen on a tarmac in Kuwait. And I literally, at the end of the movie, I turned and I looked at the director, Jonathan, and I go, "Really?
Is that all?"
I just got my ass shot at for 16 months, and you're telling me I got 1.1 second? Really? I learned the hard way what the lessons of the movie production business was.
That's the exactly. That was all. I guess all of that training as an actor actually paid off for 1.1 second.
I can carry a boom mic. I'm better than most. So anyway, it was a labor of love, and they were awesome. And I got to be honest, life-changing stuff. When you look into those eyes of those kids and you realize that you're making a difference, and in time you're saving lives. As a civilian, I never served. I was born in the military. My father was a captain in the Air Force. I was born at Fort McConnell up in Wichita, Kansas. And I never thought I'd be able to do something that might make a difference. When I was invited to go to Iraq the first time, it was a very clandestine mission, and I couldn't tell anybody for the longest time. And then finally I got permission when I was in Truckee driving back to Phoenix that I could tell my family. And I could tell my wife and my 3 children. And my daughter was 9 years old at the time. And I had to figure out a way to tell them that I was going to, civilian, stupid little old me at 47 was going to go ahead and go into an active war zone, and I needed their blessing. And how does that happen? So I spent 1,000 miles driving, practicing that speech. It's not a phone call you make, let's face it. And when I got home, I sat the kids down and I sat my wife down. And I looked at them and I said, listen, my country has asked me a favor. And I don't think too many times in life you are given that privilege. And only a handful of people ever would be in a position where their country has asked them a favor. And I think I was obligated to say yes. And I would like your blessing to do this. And my 9-year-old little girl, Molly, looked at me and said, what can we do, Daddy? And so she herded up the third grade classes at her elementary school, told her teacher, said, I'd like to do something too. And the 4 classes of third graders spent the next 2 weeks writing letters to the soldiers and folded them up on little blue paper and put them in envelopes and gave them to me. And while we were getting shot at or on a flight line or in a bunker or waiting at some outpost somewhere for something to happen, we would break into these letters and read to the soldiers and the Marines through the voices of the kids in my daughter's class. And they would hear their own children's voice. And the tears that would flow to this day change your heart. And that's from a place of a 9-year-old little girl here in Phoenix, Arizona. So let me tell you, if you don't wonder if you can make a difference, everybody has a role to play.
Yeah, it's remarkable how small the world can be if you're willing to make it that small. Yeah. You know, if you're willing to tie things together like that emotionally. So
let me do one last thing here, because you asked me one of the questions you asked me is how do people get involved? Okay, so we actually established a nonprofit foundation through myself and my family called Friends of Freedom.
There you go. He's wearing a lapel pin. There you go. I need one of those, by the way.
Yeah, I got one of those for you. I've actually got the coin for you. In fact, if you ever decide to come down here, did I mention we are in Phoenix?
Yes, I did. Okay. I did hear about that.
Okay, good. Anyway, so Friends of Freedom is a nonprofit foundation, a 501c3. We've been around for 15 years now. And we deliver an assortment of different programs, from morale programming to compassionate programming and translating military service into civilian success. So a lot of times we're helping. Pardon me? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was different. There's different places on the timeline where different things are required. And morale was one of those things at the time that was really important. So that's where the Cigars for Soldiers program resides. And then we also do battalion picnics, and we do getaways and all sorts of fun stuff for people to re-engage. Compassionate programming can be everything from helping some National Guardsmen pay their power bill to providing a worthy individual that maybe was referred to me by the Chaplains Corps. We've donated dozens of cars to service members who are either reservists or National Guardsmen, the kind of the forgotten soldier, and help them fulfill their dreams. And then there's the last part of the puzzle, and that's the translating their military service into civilian success. How does somebody like you, an Army grunt, excuse me, didn't mean to call you a grunt. That's it, baby. Get those stripes out, right? The transitioning and what you learned and what you're capable of and what you were trained to do in military terminology does not translate to your average business owner or business manager as marketable skills. So what we did was we became kind of a translator. I speak Arabic and a couple of other things, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. When somebody can't speak the language, it's very hard to be employed. And so we needed to give them the tools and create the tools and the pathways for them to be able to take the skill sets that they had earned the hard way and use those out here to make money. So we do that in a lot of different arenas and forums. And friendsoffreedom.us, anybody that wants to help support, we would certainly appreciate it. We have a 91% pass-through. We're very proud of the fact that absolutely nobody in our organization gets paid. Everybody is completely voluntary.
It's all people just doing good work because they know that it's something that needs to be done.
It started out as being civilians that never served, that wanted to do things and give back. And because the needs changed, I've evolved the board a little bit to add 4 or 5 guys on the board, gals too, that are military, that were active duty, transitioned into veterans, etc. And they were much smarter than I was. They knew more about these people coming out of the military and what they were facing getting into life, and so they've made quite a difference. So.
Yeah, it's a big problem because when if you're in a combat arms kind of job in the military, you're basically learning how to kill people and blow up things, and most people don't need that at their job. Most companies don't require that. They would require a little more specificity of skill. So
yeah. That's a rare job description that says blow things up, break things.
Yes, exactly. So, but of course, the skills you learn and the ability to carry out a mission is what companies want. They want someone who's able to focus and
sometimes just a simple thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So, okay, so. I'm mindful of your time now, and I know we could talk forever, but let me. I can
do this all day.
Yes, I know. As can I, as you know. But let's put a little bow on it with little direction toward the cigar stuff. And now tell me, if somebody wants to get some of your cigars, or somebody wants to be involved in, if they want to learn about it, can they go to your website and find out more? If they want to hire you to do a cigar event, where do they go for that?
Thank you. So Fumar Cigars is the name of the company, and we do lots of different stuff, from event production and event capacity, where we do cigar rolling shows and interactive engagement programming, telling that story of Americana through the lens of the tobacco leaf, trained historians that kind of take people on that journey, if you will. And that's through our event production side. And then we also, I carry 700 or 800 lines of other people's cigars. We make about 500,000 cigars a year, of which we can do custom banding, custom logoing, creating, like the cigar I made for you. I can do that for anybody. There you go. Thank you. There you go. That's it. And we do. That's it. And we do it all in house. We do everything in house. We have a turnaround.
Will be available too.
There you go.
This one's my favorite. Tell the audience about this.
That's a
kind of barbershop wrapped tobacco that's in this one. I'll describe for those who can't see. It's a multiple colored wrapped.
Imagine a barber pole. Okay, the hardest thing in the world is to roll a cigar with 2 different wrapper leaves. Took me a decade to figure it out how to do it, and
a decade's worth of effort right there, folks.
That's it. Yeah, so
it's worth it. Trust me.
And it's great. It has a couple of different taste and flavor components because of that, and it's a unique and individual cigar. But what we do is we can craft anybody's custom cigars. And we do everything in-house from top to bottom. No, I don't own the fields. Yes, I do own the factory. Yes, we do make the cigars. Yes, we do the custom banding and everything else in-house. And our turnaround time is like literally overnight. And minimum runs of 16. So, I mean, we don't have to do 5,000 anymore to scale things. We can do things down at around 16 to 32 cigars. So it makes us very capable for an individual to say, you know what, I got a golf outing with a bunch of guys. I'd like to put my picture. I want my picture on the cigar. I can do that. And so, our website's www.fumarcigarsusa.com, and you can't buy a thing there. I don't do online sales. I don't do the internet thing, but it's a great story on there about our programs. There's lots of different tabs. You can see the Prohibition era liquors. You can see the rare pre-embargo Cuban cigars. You can see all the crazy stuff that I've collected throughout the years and all that. But most importantly, our contact information is on there, and you can reach out to us. We are considered a personal services company. So you have to call us. You have to email us. We need to talk to you to do business together.
I would appreciate it if you give me that phone number and the email, and so that people listening to this can go to it right now.
So the phone number is 623-594-4020. And the email address is events, that's plural, at Fumar Cigars Inc. INC.com.
Nice. Okay.
And that's how,
So
you get a hold of us.
I'll have all that on my website, and the Way of the Renaissance Man website as well. I'll have links to that. And I strongly recommend anyone interested in the history part of it to go to the site, because I found that quite interesting and I loved it. I thought it was super, like, it gives you a better perspective of what, and it also brings you into the actual pastime with a sense of history. And that's, to me, that's an important thing to do, because if I know where people have been that have made it possible, I can enjoy it just a little bit more. And life is all about enjoying things just a little bit more.
Hey, they always asked, they asked John D. Rockefeller. They had hundreds of billions of dollars of worth, and they kept asking him, "How much more money do you need?" And he said the same thing over and over again: just a little bit more.
Exactly. And with that, I thank you, David. Thanks for being on the Way of the Renaissance Man.
Thank you for having me. We're very grateful.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Way of the Renaissance Man podcast and lifestyle website are copyrighted 2020 by Jim Woods, all rights reserved. For more great interviews and Renaissance Man resources, visit wayoftherenaissanceman.com.